We have the patch notes for Teamfight Tactics for patch 11.12. So this one, it's still a big patch, just not quite as big as the ones we've had before. As you guys can see here, we have like 3 rows of changes for buffs, 2 for nerfs, and 1 for adjustments. And let's just get right into this because this is like another big patch, so I don't want to waste any time. So it's time to fight back, but how? Assemble the missing Skyglass pieces starting in June 15th, ending July 7th. So this one, pretty much you just get a bunch of rewards for doing a couple of missions. And that's awesome. More loot there. And they also have new little legends. So the first one is Skyglass Eggs and Earth Dowsy. So this is one of them here. And so they pretty much have like eggs from the beginning of the game. And then they have something for more like the whales or hardcore spenders, such as this little legend right here. If you guys want that, like you'll have to probably spend quite a bit to get it. I'm not really sure how much. I didn't really do the math on it, but I think it drops from an egg. So onto the lobby. So PC only, from the TFT lobby, you can click on your portrait to switch between your current little legend and summoner icon. And then for the systems, loot orbs. So this is a big change here. Loot's familiar, new consumables have been added as rare drops from loot orbs. So we have the Reforger. This is an item that we've seen in the past where you can rebuild an item that you currently built already. And then we also have a magnetic remover, which is used to remove items equipped to current champions. So now onto the armory. This is another big change. It's one of the fundamental things in the set, and it's going to be a little different than what we've seen in the past. So the armory on stage 3-2 is being changed. It's going from 2 regular components to 1 shadow and 1 regular. The armory on 2-2 is going to be the same. On 4-2, they're removing this armory, but they are going to have like an armory frequency starting on stage 4. So during stage 4-2, you still could see an armory. It's just not guaranteed. And now you have a chance to see it on 4-2, 5-2, and 6-2. And pretty much like these will have a variety of different options, including the consumables we talked about before, Nikos, and loaded dice. Loaded dice, in case you guys didn't know, this was one of the things from last set which helped you get a lot of 3 stars. And essentially you just put it on one of your champions and you get champions with those same traits. You could also get spatulas, item components, combined items, and emblems. Emblems are just completed spatula items. So with this armory, the later stages are going to be more powerful. So you'll probably see like item components if you get it in stage 4, and like maybe full items if you get it in stage 6. And then in Hyperroll for the armory there, you get it on 5-2, 7-2, and 9-2. And then for the basic armory, these have been slightly adjusted to accommodate the newly stocked armory. So now onto Critical Strike. This is another big change. Critical Strike has always been broken. If you guys looked at my video on like 9 advanced tips to climb in TFT, pretty much like Critical Strike was one of those elements you really wanted to buff up on each of your carries. But now that's going to change. And let's see how it changed. Pretty much they're just reducing the Critical Strike bonus damage from 150% to 130%. What this means is itemizing for crit, probably not as good as it was before. And that also means Bramble Vest not as important as it was before, which is good because I think Bramble Vest was one of the 2 strong items, and then Jeweled Gauntlet was way too much stronger than Hat. Infinity Edge was way too much stronger than Deathblade, so hopefully this balances things out a little bit. I wish there was a different way to do it though, because I do like the concept of critical hits being something that's like feels good once you do it. Because right now, if they're reducing critical strikes by too much, it's not going to feel as good whenever you crit. So now onto the traits. So they added a bunch of what they call reach traits. These are essentially traits where if you get like a lot of the same trait, you get an additional bonus. So for example, they're adding Dragon Slayer 6, Ironclad 4. Normally you could only get 4 Dragon Slayer or 3 Ironclad. They're adding Renewer 6, Revenant 4, Spellweaver 6, and Skirmisher 9. So Skirmisher 9 might be a little hard to get because you have to go level 9 for that, but Spellweaver 6 seems really strong. Revenant Spatula seems really useful because Ivern and Volibear are pretty decent units on their own, so if you do want to go to 4 Revenants, you probably have a pretty good incentive to. And then 6 Renewer sounds pretty interesting as well. Maybe it works in like a crazy Heimerdinger build that we don't really know about yet. Onto the trait balancing. So this is a lot of different changes here. Cavalier damage reduction is being changed. So at 3 and 4 Cavalier, it's now being reduced by 5%. 2 Cavalier is being untouched. Monstrosity, this is another big change. So they're talking about the Abominations right now with the Monstrosity. It now stops charging after slamming into 2 targets. This has huge implications because right now the Monstrosity, it reaches people's backline and essentially just like kills whoever their carry is. Now it doesn't do that. It's probably going to stop somewhere in the middle of the map, and essentially it's going to be much, much weaker. So what I don't like about this change is that The Monstrosity now removes attack speed slows and AD reduction effects when he casts a spell. That's good. He's also getting an armor and magic resist buff, so they definitely are making him more tanky. But what I don't like is that after they nerfed him charging into only 2 targets, I do not like how they nerfed his attack damage and his bonus AD. It just doesn't really make sense because he's going to be like infinitely weaker now that this first change takes place. Like this change is a bigger nerf than these two, and these 2 buffs really don't make up for that. Obviously, Abominations were a little too strong, but just getting rid of this or just adding this, and then maybe like these 2 buffs, and then removing these 2 nerfs, it still probably would be weaker overall, but we'll see how that plays out. I get it, like they want the identity of Abominations to be more of a tank class than a damage class, and like I completely understand that, but they nerfed it way too hard in my opinion. I don't really think it's that worth it to go Abominations apart from the early game. So Dawnbringer's 10 to 12%. Redeemed armor and magic resist ability power is being increased at 6 and 9 redeemed. So that one means a little bit for 6 redeemed. That is always a trait that you could go for, but 9 redeemed is a little bit much. Skirmisher's max health shield is now being changed, and it is being buffed 5% at 3 skirmishers. 6 skirmishers still pretty weak in my opinion. I feel like they nerfed that too much in the previous patch. Now onto the champions, tier 1s. Lissandra, finally. Lissandra might be a champion now. She's getting buffed a little bit, so tiny damage buffs here. I think is around like 10-12%, both on her primary and secondary damage. And then Vayne Silver Bolts being buffed at 1 and 2 star. They're not touching the 3 star. I actually really like the Vayne change. Maybe she's more usable in the early game, and then they're not making her 3 star way too broken, so I do enjoy that. Vladimir max mana buff is being changed from 85 to 80 mana. I thought they were going to change the roll odds, but I guess they skipped on that. So they must have taken that change out of their patch notes. If you guys were curious, like the reason why I know some of these changes before this patch notes came out is because they give a preview every Sunday. I post them on my website, so in case you guys are looking for that, if you want like absolute like latest news, definitely head on over to my website, BunnyMuffins.lol. But it's not official notes. They made a lot of changes since then, which is good because they get feedback from the community. But in case you wanted to see what they were doing earlier, like definitely go check that out. So now onto the tier 2s. Brand mana lock after casting 1 to 1.5 seconds, so he's not going to be constantly like killing everything anymore. Hecarim's Spirit of Dread now correctly scales with ability power. It's actually crazy. This is a bug fix, and Hecarim should have been even stronger than he was before. So they need to nerf him like a lot. So all these, like this huge damage reduction and this huge healing reduction, I don't even think that, like, I haven't done the math, but like these seem perfectly in line to keep him around the same power level as he was before. He might even be like stronger now that I think about it. Let me read if they mention him here. They don't really talk about it. So I have heard that they are trying to make him like around the same, but I think he's actually stronger now that his ability correctly scales with ability power because it wasn't before. Leblanc, they are completely gutting this champion. They're reducing her damage by 50%. First off, like Leblanc isn't even that strong. So I don't know why they're doing it. Are assassins good? They are good, but once more than one person goes for assassins, they start to suck. The interesting thing about Leblanc is that I don't remember any champion that has been nerfed in their damage by like 50% almost ever. This is like the first time it's happened. I get where they're coming from though. So despite all this like nonsense where they're like just chop the damage in half, like I get where they're coming from. Essentially what they don't want happening is Leblanc being the primary carry of assassins because she's a crowd control unit. Makes perfect sense to me. However, like she's kind of useless now. They also changed her stun duration from 2 seconds to scaling now. But who's ever going to go for a 3-star Leblanc if she's only doing 250 damage? Probably no one is my guess. Also, they're nerfing Critical Strike, which is a nerf to LeBlanc's damage, so she's getting like doubly nerfed for like no reason, because she isn't even that strong right now. Is she annoying? Yes. Is she like not thematic because Katarina and Nocturne should be the carries for assassins? Yes, but there are definitely different ways to approach this, and this change stun is definitely a nerf as well because again, no one's going to go for LeBlanc 3, so when you're sitting at LeBlanc 1, it's going to be even worse than it is now. At least they buffed her health though. I guess 50 health makes up for dealing 50% less damage. They must have mixed up what a percent is and what a flat number is. But on to the next change, we have Nautilus attack damage, 65 to 80 attack damage. And the Nautilus Anchor Slam is dealing around like 25% or 50 more damage at level 1, 2, and 3. So I guess that's not 25%. That's just 50 more damage flat. So Nautilus, he hasn't really been played too much, but I do think he needs to be stronger, but they don't want him to be too oppressive. So I think buffing his attack damage makes him stronger in the early game. Late game, it doesn't really change it at all. So maybe you could run Nautilus as like your early to mid game transition unit more often now. Same for Sejuani, same for Thresh. Obviously, like these two units are much better than Nautilus. Sejuani is great in any Cavalier build, and Thresh is good in Forgotten and other Knights because he CCs a backline unit. So even though these changes look a little weird, I think I kind of like them because they're buffing them, but they're not making them like too broken in the late game. Now onto tier 3. True to her roots, Zyra will cast her spell at the same time as before, but will now be able to cast again sooner. So Katarina, Sinister Blade primary damage is being reduced at 3-star for some reason, like maybe they were high when they made this change. Katarina's Sinister Blade secondary damage is now being reduced at 3-star as well. So 3-star Cat is really strong. It's just really hard to get. I don't know if she really needed this nerf, especially with the Infinity Edge or critical strike nerfs that Assassins got. So they're nerfing something twice that wasn't necessarily like the best comp by far, which is a little strange to me. I'm not really too sure why. So Riven's Blade of the Dawn attack damage bonus is being nerfed. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, Riven was a little strong at 3-star. I will definitely say that. And they're nerfing her attack damage. I think this is fair. See, there's a difference between nerfing Riven in this small way, and like the Cat is a very similar nerf in terms of the numbers, right? They're like both very slight nerfs. But because with Katarina, they're nerfing Leblanc and they're nerfing critical strike damage, that's when I think it's a little bit much. A Nunu max mana nerf, okay, very understandable. When a Nunu eats your Hecarim 3-star, when Hecarim's nearly at full health, you know something's a little wrong with the game because that Hecarim normally doesn't die to anything. So this Nunu nerf is very welcome. However, with the Abomination nerf as well on top of this, again, they're nerfing things like too hard. I don't know why they do this every patch. It seems like they just want to change the game for the sake of changing the game, and they don't actually like want to make everything playable, even though they say that's their goal. I know that's their goal, but like based on these changes, like you look at skirmishers from the previous patch, they nerfed them like 50 different ways. Were they the best comp? Yes, they were the best comp. Were they 50 nerfs from being like a mediocre comp? No, they're probably only like 3 or 4. Maybe 5 if they were like minor nerfs, but they made like 2 huge nerfs to skirmishers and then nerfed it like in 2 or 3 other ways, which is a little ridiculous. But that's just me. But somehow they keep doing this. They don't really learn from the past. I don't really know why. They've been doing this since set 1. They were doing a good job of this in set 4.5. Remember when I was reading the patch notes for set 4.5, even though I hated Chosen, I gave them props because I was like, wow, they didn't nerf this comp majorly in 5 different ways. They nerfed it slightly in like 2 to 3 ways. They're not doing that in set 5, and it's no wonder that they've had like billions of like pages of patch notes every time a patch comes out. And like, I don't know about you guys, but it's hard to keep up with the meta when it's like that as like a casual player, because you don't have like time to play 8 hours a day to like relearn a patch every 2 weeks or relearn the game every 2 weeks. So I do wish that they didn't have these huge changes that often, because if they just made slight changes, like it would just be a lot more playable and like more things would be viable. They always say they want everything to be viable, but when you nerf something to the absolute ground, like skirmishers or like this LeBlanc, it's just not going to be played that much anymore. So Zyra max mana buff, this is fine. Zyra was pretty weak. This is a good buff. And they buffed her damage a little bit at 1 and 2 star. Yeah, perfectly fine. Like Zyra changes, like I think that's reasonable. Katarina, not so much because they're nerfing other parts about her, but like Zyra makes perfect sense. Nunu was annoying, but like the way they nerfed Abomination, maybe it's a little too much doing everything at once. So tier 4, Jax may not need a weapon, but he needs a helping hand. I wonder why. So Aphelios max mana buff. All right, sure. Aphelios is actually like pretty decent right now. He's just kind of countered by a lot of the assassins in my opinion. But since they're getting nerfed, he should be even stronger. But now they're kind of like double buffing him because assassins aren't going to be played as much, and he's getting a mana buff. Is that too much since he was probably like low A tier, high B tier last patch? Maybe. But I guess we haven't seen him in the S tier, so maybe it's his time to shine, you know? Jack's empowered strike bonus attack speed is being increased. a lot at 3-star and a little bit at 1 and 2-star. I'm glad that they're buffing the 3-star. Maybe it actually does something. And the 1 and 2-star buffs, it's still not enough, in my opinion, to make skirmishers like that great of a comp. It's always hard balancing those melee-only classes where you need 6 of them to really work. If you think about like Berserkers, you think about like Slayers, skirmishers are essentially like that same class. They're the melee class that just does a lot of damage. Really hard to balance, but I think they need to buff the skirmisher trait a little bit more, just because Trundle and Pantheon went from like the best champs in the world to like very mediocre. Karma mana lock is now being increased by 0.25 seconds. Karma max mana buff is being reduced mana by 10. And then mana reduction per cast is now being changed. It's going to be 15, 15, 30 instead of 20, 20, 40. Karma's Soul Flare damage is being increased, so they're making her hit harder but cast a little less, which I think is fine. She always like hits things and they barely are not able to kill them, so maybe this is actually like a pretty good buff, so I'm glad that they adjusted it over here. I think overall, is this a nerf or a buff? Really tough to say. I'd have to see it in practice because they are nerfing Jeweled Gauntlet, so that does reduce her damage as well. So we'll just have to see once we get in game. Vel'Koz attack speed being buffed, so now he should cast faster. So tier 5 Kayle, Divine Ascend, 3rd Ascension attacks per immunity, 7 to 10. So I'm guessing, like, I don't know about you guys, like, I haven't seen too many Kayles in my game, but I have heard in, like, gold games, like, Kayle absolutely destroys everything. So I guess a nerf is warranted. I'm not really too sure, but I don't really play Kayle, and I don't really see Kayle at all. But let's just trust that that is the reason why. So items, we are going to see Archangel's mana ratio being increased and Archdemon's Staff of Immortality mana ratio increased. This is good because both Archangel's and Archdemon's Staff are very underplayed right now. Like, you'd always much rather have a blue buff and Jeweled Gauntlet, or like Shojin and Jeweled Gauntlet instead of going Archangels. But with the crit nerf, with the Archangel's buff, maybe you are allowed to build an Archangels more often now. Bloodthirster lifesteal being reduced, and then Riskthirster self-damage is being reduced. So they're buffing Riskthirster and nerfing Bloodthirster. Perfectly reasonable, because Bloodthirster was by far much better than Riskthirster in pretty much 99.999% of situations. Hand of Justice attack damage and ability power, 40 to 50. So unlike Dogecoin, which has blown up since the set came out, Hoj has kind of been like nerfed to the ground, so it's kind of like the inverse of that. So this little buff doesn't really do that much. Ionic Spark Magic Resist Shred is being increased by 10%. All right, they're buffing an item that sucks. That's good. I don't think it's enough, but it's a start. Sacrificial Gauntlet self-damage, 15% of max health is being changed to 100% of max mana multiplied by star level. So essentially, if you are a 3-star, you are going to be hit much harder than you were before. And now that it's based on mana, champions like Karma can build it now, because at 15% max health, Karma just killed herself without a healing item. But now since it's 100% of max mana multiplied by star level, more champions can use it, which is great, because when more champions can use something, that's like pretty much the goal of like the game balance, right? Titan's Revenge damage, 25% to 20% of pre-mitigation damage taken. So they're nerfing this, I think. I'm not really sure why, though. I didn't see this built that much. It was really just good on champions like Hecarim, but regular Titan's Resolve was perfectly fine as well. And they like tried to change Hecarim in certain ways, and they nerfed Cavaliers. So I don't know. I didn't see too many people abusing this item, but maybe they thought that this was too strong. Let me know down in the comments. Have you guys been building this item a lot? Have you been facing it a lot? Has it been dominating games that warranted a nerf? Let me know. Vengeful Trapclaw has been renamed to Banshee's Trapclaw. That's a good change. I know it does nothing for the game, but it is like, makes more sense, you know? Now onto the bug fixes. Brand's cast no longer counts twice towards on-cast effects such as Archangel Staff and Shadow Jeweled Gauntlet. Hecarim's Spirit of Dread now correctly scales with ability power. Yeah, I still find that so funny that it didn't work before, but he was still completely busted. Yeah, it's just really funny. Vel'Koz will now find a new target for his life form Disintegration Ray if his target becomes untargetable, such as from Guardian Angel or Revenant. This was a change that we've wanted for like the past 3 patches. I'm glad that they put it in now. Stick him with the pointy end. Pantheon will now face his new combat target with Aegis Assault if his current target becomes untargetable. And then damage takes from Pantheon's Aegis Assault can now properly critically strike and be dodged. Interesting, I did not know that before. I did not know that this was a bug. Re-stealing the credit. Rel is now properly credited for her shielding and shields and healing chart. So no longer chasing Thunder, units should no longer attempt to chase Kennen if he dashes very far away. That was a very funny interaction. Kennen's probably still going to be good. And yeah, Kennen's just broken in general, honestly. Fix the rare bug where Kindred's Wolf would get stuck in Lamb. Okay, I did not experience that, so that's kind of funny. Overall thoughts on the patch. I'm kind of disappointed overall. I feel like they keep over-nerfing things and probably underbuffed certain things as well. It's just like I have to relearn the game. I have to spend like 10 to 12 hours relearning the game every 2 weeks. It's just a little annoying. Plus, we might have B patches, so instead of every 2 weeks, it might be every week. It's hard to keep up at like a high level, I'm going to be honest with you guys, unless you just play for like at least 5 hours a day or something like that, or 4 hours a day. I know other players can do that, but they are like some of the best players in the world, and like I never claimed to be the best in the world. For me, it takes me like maybe playing 4 hours a day to really get acclimated, and then like after that I'm used to the patch. But probably takes me like 3 days to do that. So I think this whole set so far, like sometimes I skip a week of playing because I'm like, I don't want to relearn the whole game and like lose all my elo trying to learn it, because like they just make so many huge changes. If they make like some slight nerfs and buffs here and there, it's much easier to keep up with TFT, and that's what they normally do. So in previous sets, that's what they do, because they didn't, again, like set 4.5, they didn't have many B patches in set 4.5 from what I remember, compared to like every other set that they've had. And that's because they were more like careful with the balancing, and they're not even more careful, they're just smarter about it. I'll just say that there. But so far in set 5, they're like, buff this to infinity, nerf this to 0, like every single time something is a little strong or a little weak, and it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they keep doing this. I thought they learned in set 4.5 to not do that. And even Riot themselves, they said that set 4 is probably like the most popular set, and I don't know why they don't just copy what they did during the popular set. So yeah, it's completely like foreign to me. Like most things, I feel like what I've been saying is pretty common sense. It's like don't make the same mistake that you've been doing for the past 2 years. So like again, like I gave them a lot of props for patches in set 4.5, but yeah, in set 5 so far, it's just like you might as well just release a new set every 2 weeks, because the game is pretty much completely different. We are playing champions that we never played before every patch, and we are never playing the champion that we played all week in the last patch. But let me know your thoughts. Like, I don't mean to be so negative, but like I wonder like who actually made this patch, honestly, because it just doesn't make sense. I also want to know who did the Skirmisher nerf. But at the end of the day, it's just a video game, guys, so it's like we shouldn't get too worked up about it. But I just want to have fun playing my video game, and I don't want to spend like 10 hours doing a tutorial every 2 weeks. So that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down below. Hopefully, like if you guys enjoy all these patches, do let me know, because I am curious about like why you enjoyed these types of things. I know that like changes are good, it keeps things fresh, but it doesn't really let people solve the meta, which is something that they like to stress as well. Whenever something's broken, they're like, oh, why don't you figure out a counter to it? Well, if they keep doing all these huge changes, you don't give us time to figure out counters to certain comps or champions. So they're very like inconsistent with what they say. It seems that they just say whatever to fit their narrative, but enough of that, I'll stop ranting. It's like, I'm just very surprised about a lot of changes in this patch. That is all. Like, more so than every other patch I've read. But if you guys enjoyed this, like, I guess subscribe or whatever, because I'm gonna make a bunch of videos this week. There's going to be like an interesting one in either Wednesday or Thursday. And then I'm going to do like, of course, a meta snapshot on Friday, and then like some gameplay on the weekend. And we'll see what happens in the week after. I'm also going to try to do another coaching video with a high level player if you guys are interested in that. So I will see you guys later.